So chapter 17, the divisions of faith. Arjuna inquired, "O Krishna, what is the situation of those who do not follow the principles of scripture, but worship according to their own imagination? Are they in goodness, in passion, or in ignorance?" So Arjuna asked this question because the end of 16th chapter, Krishna says that one who discards the scriptures and who lives their life just according to their whims, they neither achieve happiness in this world or in the next. So therefore, Arjuna is asking this question for our benefit, that what about those who worship something or somebody, but not according to the principles of scripture, but just according to their own imagination? So you see, especially in India, you see people just worshiping anything or anybody. They will put a stone under a tree, or they will have people even worship movie stars, or they worship sports stars. They engage in some kind of worship of some even like ghosts and things like that. So what is there any value to such worship, and what is the result of such worship? So he's asking, are they in goodness, in passion, or in ignorance? Because we'll see that in Kali Yuga more and more that people are coming up with their own religion in one sense. They come up with their own theory, and then they create a person or an object around which a whole system is created, and then people worship it.
Actually, I was just thinking that worship is so innate to the soul. And so faith is the same way, right? That, if we understand that the nature of the soul is to love and to serve, right? We talked about that's the dharma. So that dharma is going to be reposed somewhere. Whether that dharma is going to be reposed in nature, whether it's going to be reposed in some deity or some superior power or some celebrity
or some system of governance,
or even some political or even educational system, right? Like scientific discoveries or technology, whatever it is, we are made up of our faith. We cannot really separate our faith from ourselves. And even the greatest empirical scientists, they still have to work with their faith. Faith is our belief system. In order to do anything, we really require some kind of a belief system within which we can actually work. And that belief system is our faith, that by doing this, I will acquire what I'm looking for.
Yeah, internally, everybody likes to be worshipped, right? But that's in the conditioned nature, everybody likes to be worshipped and or acquire facilities by worshipping somebody else so that others will worship them. So this is the nature of this world, that we are constantly worshipping somebody or something, and we have faith in something or somebody. So how do we understand that so that we don't get deluded? Because there is saying that there's one person who said that jato mat tato pat, that you can just imagine whoever you want to worship, and you can also imagine whatever way or whatever path you want to follow, and ultimately you'll get there. So is that really true? And how do we understand that? The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, according to the modes of nature acquired by the embodied soul, one's faith can be of three kinds: in goodness, in passion, or in ignorance. Now hear about this. So it's very interesting that how Krishna is describing that one's worship and one's faith, they are also influenced by this goodness, passion, and ignorance. And when Krishna is talking about this, he's talking about material faith. Because the transcendental faith, the soul has transcendental faith in the Supreme. And that's when the soul is in the spiritual world. But when the soul comes to this material world, that transcendental faith or Shraddha gets reflected or kind of gets transformed into this material faith. Then we start worshipping and having faith in a materialistic way. So that's what he's talking about. The faith in goodness, faith in passion, and faith in ignorance. So before we get into Krishna's answers, maybe let me ask you this question, that what do you think is faith in goodness? What are some of the symptoms of how it's manifested? What is faith in passion, and what is faith in ignorance? And then we'll see what Krishna says. Can you think
faith
of
and passion would be worshipping Kali and Durga Devi, those people who are demigods.
Okay, somebody else? Thank you, Nandakumar Prabhu.
I think faith in passion is when you worship someone for some material gains, whereas faith in goodness is when you worship someone not for any of your gains, but for the pleasure of the deity or the Lord. Faith in ignorance is probably you don't pray at all.
Okay. Okay.
Faith in ignorance is like I'll go to Tirupati, I'll give my hair. It's like having a barter system with God. Like, I'll shave my head if you grant me this, or I'll do this if you give me this, and having that conditional love towards God. Like,
Okay. So that would be passion. That's nice. Okay.
Faith in ignorance is when you are just carrying out the steps, but there's no real feeling behind it either way. Like not for your own gain, not for anyone else's gain. You just do the routine.
Okay.
No knowledge. Okay.
No knowledge. Okay.
Anybody else? Shweta, what do you think?
Faith in ignorance, I feel that when we follow the traditions blindly and without realizing that why we are doing so, there are certain things that has been coming, whether there is good or bad. No analysis has been done on that, and no scripture in any of our religious books, but still we are doing, just thinking that yes, this will supposed to go on that way only.
Okay, so you're talking about like blind faith.
Blind faith, yes.
Okay, let's get into the text.
Okay.
Those are all good responses. Let's see what Krishna says.
What Sri Krishna says. O son of Bharata, according to one's existence under the various modes of nature, one evolves a particular kind of faith. The living being is said to be of a particular faith according to the modes he has acquired.
Did you talk about what the word Shraddha means, where you place your heart?
Yeah.
So the Sanskrit word Shraddha, faith, so the word Shraddha literally means where one places one's heart. So it's obviously a very, very important thing, where we place our heart, because where we place our heart is where, our entire life is going to be, impacted by that. So faith is very, very important. So let's.
Okay. So here is Krishna's statement about this. Men in the mode of goodness worship the demigods. Those in the mode of passion worship the demons. And those in the mode of ignorance worship the ghosts and spirits. So this is how Krishna is describing faith in different modes. And worshipping the demigods, again, this is again assuming that they are following the dictations given in the scriptures to worship the demigods. If somebody just worships the demigods, again, according to their own whims and fancies, then that veers more towards mode of passion and ignorance. Worshipping demons is somebody who, demon is not like somebody very ferocious looking, but demon is somebody who does not have faith in the scriptures, who doesn't have faith in the Supreme Lord. So we see right now in this world, people are worshipping such personalities. They put them on the pedestal, somebody who has, say, lots of money and lots of power. People worship such people.
Or if somebody can show some magic, or somebody has some charisma even, right? So all those kinds of worship, which are completely based on, again, like I think somebody pointed out, what's in it for me? A lot of times people worship these personalities because they feel like they can get something. And mode of ignorance, of course, is, the black magic and the, there's in different cultures, there is this sort of worship of the dark forces, right? So that would be mode of ignorance.
So just to contrast it with, I think someone mentioned that if you go to God with a business transaction in mind, do you think that is worshiping in the mode of, what mode is that worship? Is that in the mode of passion, or what kind of mode is that?
It is passion.
Okay, why?
because you are basically desiring some material benefits by worshipping.
Okay, but Krishna is not saying that here. So how do we understand that? And first of all, is it true that going to God or Krishna for some material benefit, is that really in the mode of passion? Is that faith in the mode of passion? That's the question. The person could be in the mode of passion, but is that faith with which a person approaches or worships God with the idea of getting something back in return? Is that faith in the mode of passion?
No, because Krishna gives three qualities. Mode of goodness is worshipping gods. Mode of passion is worshipping demons, and ignorance is worshipping ghosts. So he clarifies that in the first place.
Right. So approaching God and worshipping God directly, even with the objective of getting something back, like business transaction, that faith is still transcendental faith. But the worship itself is mixed because it's called karma mishra bhakti, like you have some desire for material benefits. But Krishna really appreciates even somebody who comes to him, even with the desire to get something, right? In the 7th chapter, Krishna talks about that. Artha jigyasu artha arthi. So 4 kinds of people approach me.
But here what Krishna is saying is worshipping the demigods, not worshipping him directly. So that is in the goodness. That is
right.
That is still material faith, right?
No, but I'm talking about somebody worships Krishna directly with the objective of trying to get something.
Yeah, that is completely transcendental. But here Prabhupada is talking about, right, that you can worship Brahma, Shiva, and Indra, Chandra, all these different gods, and then so for a particular reason. So that's still considered to be mode of goodness. And then he goes on to talk about this person who worshipped Hitler during Second World War, because he amassed a lot of wealth by dealing in the black market. So anyone can think, right, that this is a powerful man, let me worship. That is by passion. And ignorance is worship of ghosts and spirits and all kinds of there's so many things, dark magic and all that.
Mantravadis.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the Shamic traditions and all that, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like things that are meant to use all kinds of sinful activities, right, to get things to become more powerful. Like there are times when even there have been some great demons in our scriptures who have engaged in great austerities and worship, but their whole purpose of that was so that they could ultimately become a big troublemaker. Right? So we can continue.
Those who undergo, so now Krishna is going to change gears and he's going to talk about austerities and penances which are performed in that particular worship. Those who undergo severe austerities and penances not recommended in the scriptures, performing them out of pride and egoism, who are impelled by lust and attachment, who are foolish and who torture the material elements of the body, as well as the super soul dwelling within, are to be known as demons. So can we think of some examples of these kind of austerities and penances which are done out of this pride and egoism or some false sense of attachment?
There are people who really hold Steve Jobs as an idol. It's like he's like their hero. And there was all these articles about how Steve Jobs always wore the same clothes and the same turtlenecks or whatever, so that he wouldn't have to think about his appearance and his body, so that he could just pour more of his attention into work and into the development of technology.
So that would be an austerity, right? Out of pride and egoism, impelled by attachment and lust, and who torture the material elements of the body. Yeah, and there are so many people who are very powerful, right? And they may actually, if we study the lives of some of these great materialists, they actually perform great austerities. Some of them wake up at 3:34 in the morning. We were reading, right? That so many of these successful people, they wake up really early and they engage in great difficulties just to get what they're looking for. But because they're impelled by lust and attachment, right? And sometimes they even engage in activities which are harmful to others.
Yeah, they walk on.
How can you harm the super soul? I mean, he says to torture the material elements of the body as well as the super soul. Super soul is totally aloof, right? I mean, doesn't interfere. I mean, so you cannot. He's beyond all this transcendental. So nothing can affect him
Actually, they walk on live coals, and sometimes they pierce during Thaipusam, those festivals. They have they pierce veil on their tongues. They undergo all those austerities. Does that include torturing the body?
Yes.
Yeah, so let's read what Prabhupada is saying. There are persons who manufacture modes of austerity and penance which are not mentioned in the scriptural injunctions. For instance, fasting for some ulterior purpose, such as to promote a purely political end. This is very common in India. People will do fasting if their needs are not met, and they will sit outside some office or something, and they will fast. Some are even known to fast until death. So these kind of austerities are considered not proper by the Supreme. The scriptures recommend fasting for spiritual advancement, not for some political end or social purpose. Persons who take to such austerities, according to Bhagavad-Gita, are certainly demoniac. Their acts are against the scriptural injunctions and not beneficial for the people in general. Actually, they act out of pride, false ego, lust, and attachment for material enjoyment. By such activities, not only is a combination of material elements of which the body is constructed disturbed, but also the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself living in the body, because the Supreme Lord is disturbed by it. He doesn't like this kind of somebody torturing their body for this kind of unwanted ends. So, and the other example is people, especially nowadays. Okay, yeah. So especially people who, in the name of religion or in the name of belief in God, they actually harm others, and that's very common nowadays. We see that some of the terrorists they think that they're doing it to please God or in the name of God. They kill so many people, or they commit suicide while killing other people. So that kind of mentality and austerity, even though they think that they're doing it, that faith is in the mode of ignorance. And such mentality is not approved by the Supreme here.
I think animal sacrifice also will fall into that group, I guess.
Yes, animal sacrifice as well.
Excellent.
So now Krishna is going to talk about that one's faith and worship tells us in what mode the person is. And now he's going to give us more examples of how we can find out in what mode the person is primarily in by the food. So now he's going to talk about food. Even the food each person prefers is of three kinds, according to the three modes of material nature. The same is true of sacrifices, austerity, and charity. Now here are the distinctions between them. So again, question: what are the food in three different modes? And please, those who have not spoken, you get the first chance to share. Dominic, what do you think? Food in the mode of goodness, food in the mode of passion, food in the mode of ignorance. Can you think of some example?
Is this like regular food? Like, should I say like vegetables and fruits and everything, or is it more symbolic?
No, it's real. It's not symbolic. So,
okay. I would imagine like the mode of goodness being fresh food that maybe that you've grown yourself, or that you've collected, like just things that come from the earth, like not animals, maybe. Mode of ignorance, maybe like mode of passion, spicy food, or like food that's hot, oily. That's what I think of. And then ignorance, I'm thinking maybe cold food, or like food that I guess has gone bad, or like food that doesn't have any nutritional value.
That's amazing.
Jamie, what do you think? Do you agree with Dominic, or do you have any other ideas about what is food in the mode of goodness, passion, or ignorance? We love to hear from you. We hardly get to hear from you. So any thoughts from you? Okay, anybody else? Shweta, go ahead.
Yes, Prabhuji. Food in goodness is the prasadam offered to Lord Krishna, and it definitely needs to be vegetarian and fresh food. And in food in the passion will be like Dominic said, it would be like spicy food and Yeah. And food in ignorance would be non-vegetarian food. And yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Okay.
You guys are very close to what Krishna is saying. So let's take a look at that.
Shall I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Food in goodness, according to me, should be the one which is eaten for hunger, for killing hunger only. Food in passion, I feel, is that one when you go for partying and start overeating, uh, uh, and it is not only satisfying our hunger, but it is satisfying other needs also. And I am not sure whether it is really satisfying other needs or not. And food in ignorance would be when we in party. Again, I'll give an example of party where you start even drinking and all of which we really know whether it is going to do anything good to our body or not. Instead of doing good, in fact, it does bad only. So
Very
these are the few ways I could put that.
Very nice take on those aspects. Thank you, Tarun
Thank
Prabhu.
you. That's very good. So let's see what Krishna says.
Okay. So he says, Ayu sattva balarogya sukhapriti vivardhana rasya snigdha stira hidya ahara satvika priya. Foods dear to those in the mode of goodness increase the duration of life. So he's first describing the symptom of such food. Purify one's existence and give strength, health, happiness, and satisfaction. Foods, such foods are juicy, fatty, wholesome, and pleasing to the heart. Fatty doesn't mean that it's like full of oil. That's not what Krishna means.
Yeah.
According to Ayurveda, you can explain.
Yeah, it just means that it is, first of all, it's wholesome, right? And fatty means it has good fat.
He says snigdha. I think that's the word. Huh?
Yeah, so it is, it's nourishing. So there are certain foods in Ayurveda that are meant to increase our ojas.
Ojas, that's the snigdha.
Yeah, so ojas comes, it's like the refined, everything that we eat, it finally becomes ojas, which is like the refined essence of all the nutrition, and it contributes towards our immunity. So such foods are, naturally, like for example, when we eat, just whatever we eat, right? Just the regular, the grains, for example, or the fruits and the vegetables and the good fats, right? All those things, they nourish the body.
And Russia, I think, is in Ayurveda,
rasa.
The 5 tastes, right?
There are 6 tastes.
6 tastes. So what are those?
So there is sweet, sour, salty, pungent, astringent, and bitter. So these are the 6 tastes that are considered to be very necessary for the upkeep of our health.
So in like a meal, we should try to include all 6.
Yeah. And fatty would also mean like, something that would actually satisfy. So in Ayurveda, you have all these different levels of tissues. So there is the rasavaha, dhatu, and then there is the meda dhatu, like that. There is rakta dhatu. So all these are all different levels of our tissues, right, in the body. So this fatty would actually mean that food that can actually satisfy so meda dhatu is like the fatty tissue of our body, which includes the brain and the nervous system. So foods that actually, because the brain actually needs good fat. So it's something that actually nourishes the finer tissue of the brain. So that way one can actually, pursue spiritual life. So like milk and, like good, products like that, ghee, they actually nourish the finer tissues of the brain.
So now Krishna is going to talk about passion. Foods that are too bitter, too sour, salty, hot, pungent, dry, and burning are dear to those in the mode of passion. Such foods cause distress, misery, and disease. So that's the symptom of foods in the mode of passion. So you're right, Tarun, when you're saying that when you go to party and overeat and just like become greedy for eating more than what we need, that basically is in the mode of passion. It causes distress, misery, and disease. Distress is like while we are eating it. Misery is that comes from like the depression is described that comes after eating it. We feel guilty and we don't feel good, and disease is of course obvious.
When Krishna talks about hot, that means it's the spiciness, right? I mean,
It's not talking about
not the heat.
Temperature hot. Otherwise, everything will be discarded. Foods prepared more than 3 hours before being eaten. Food that is tasteless, decomposed, and putrid And food consisting of remnants and untouchable things is dear to those in the mode of darkness. So that includes like non-vegetarian food and drinks, alcohol, old food that I guess in this country, I guess, or wherever, if you don't have the facility, sometimes you have to keep food in the fridge.
But I mean, like Mukund Maharaj would always say how prasadam is always transcendental.
Right.
So that's why it's okay for us to eat food that has been offered to Krishna, which is, more than 3 hours. And this is again a principle that is very strongly talked about in Ayurveda, to eat fresh and not to eat food that is, leftovers and remnants and reheating it in the microwave and things like that. We all know that it doesn't really help us.
Mentioned in the shloka also, Mataji, like 3 hours, is it mentioned in the shloka?
Yatayamam gatarasam. So it's explained by Prabhupada that's the meaning of it. If it is prepared, like if you prepare something in the morning and then you eat it in the afternoon or evening, that food has gone kind of stale. So that's considered to be in the mode of. But again, prasadam is not in that category. Even if you keep it for 2 days, like Jagannath prasadam, sometimes the food offered to Jagannath, that is eaten even after many, many days, like it's dried up and then eaten even after many days. So it is transcendental.
You can continue.
Of sacrifices, the sacrifice performed according to the directions of scripture as a matter of duty by those who desire no reward is of the mode of goodness. So sacrifice we make for whatever purpose.
As a matter of duty.
But the sacrifice performed for some material benefit or for the sake of pride, O chief of the Bharatas, you should know to be in the mode of passion. Any sacrifice performed without regard for the directions of scripture, without distribution of prasadam, spiritual food, without chanting of Vedic hymns and remunerations to the priests, and without faith is considered to be in the mode of ignorance. Sometimes people will do some sacrifice or some puja or some worship, but there's no distribution of prasadam to the people and no remuneration to the priest or whatever, no chanting of the names, then it is considered to be in the mode of ignorance. So the reverse is that in any kind of worship we do, if we chant Krishna's names and if we give out prasadam, then even with all the mistakes that we make in that, it becomes perfect.
But I have a question on that. So if I make prasadam at home and I'm by myself, so I don't distribute the way to distribute the prasadam before I eat.
This is like if somebody performs a worship or a yajna or some sacrifice, some ceremony, and if we don't distribute prasadam, then
okay, thank you.
Complete.
Austerity of the body consists in worship of the Supreme Lord, the Brahmanas, the spiritual master, and superiors like the father and mother, and in cleanliness, simplicity, celibacy, and non-violence. So this is the austerity of the body, right? So when we worship the Supreme Lord or the Brahmanas means, the great teachers, right? And the spiritual master and also the superiors. And when we practice, cleanliness, which means taking daily bath and living a simple life, a life of simple living and high thinking, right? Celibacy is also considered to be a great austerity, and non-violence, which means that we try our best not to harm anyone. So then it's considered to be austerity of the body.
So this is a very important one. Then he describes the austerity of the speech. Austerity of speech consists in speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and not agitating to others, and also in regularly reciting Vedic literature.
So this is one of the most important verses, I think. One should not speak in such a way as to agitate the minds of others. Of course, when a teacher speaks, he can speak the truth for the instruction of his students, but such a teacher should not speak to those who are not his students if he will agitate their minds. This is penance as far as talking is concerned. Besides that, one should not talk nonsense. The process of speaking in spiritual circle is to say something upheld by the scriptures. One should at once quote from scriptural authority to back up what he's saying. At the same time, such talk should be very pleasurable to the ear. By such discussions, one may derive the highest benefit and elevate human society. There's a limitless stock of Vedic literature and one should study this. This is called penance of speech. So it is described that the tongue is actually a very difficult sense to control. right? And it's continuously vibrating. And Prabhupada gives the example of a frog who croaks, and then by his croaking, he attracts the snake. So for the most part, when we, in the material world, when people talk, their talking is actually agitating. We can see that, like if you open the news channel or we go on CNN or wherever, you see how people are continuously speaking stuff that can really agitate your mind and really make us feel really depressed, right? So, but austerity of speech means that somebody speaks truthfully, which means that there is no fear in expressing the truth, and one is not speaking to cater to, even like for spiritual people, sometimes there's a tendency to speak soft, sweet words which are not truthful, just to please the audience or just to make them feel good about wherever they are at. But it's the duty of a sadhu to actually speak the truth. But at the same time, in the name of speaking truth, sometimes some people can be very harsh, right? Or very judgmental, or just very, very like condemning. So that is another aspect, that while we speak truth, the truth has to be spoken in a way that is actually pleasing to the other person. There is a little story of that there was an astrologer who, there were two astrologers, and they both, the king wanted to know what was the fate, what was his fate going to be. And so the first one said, oh, you're going to actually see all your family members, your children, your everyone will die in front of you. Basically what he wanted to say was that you're going to have a very long life. So when the other astrologer came, he said, you're going to have such a long life that you're actually going to see, everyone around you, you'll see your grandchildren, you'll see, so they both conveyed the same truth. But in the first case, he agitated the mind, right? So it's the same thing being spoken, but at the same time, one is pleasing and one is not so pleasing. And then third one is beneficial.
Beneficial, yeah. One should not just say something for one's own benefit, but I guess beneficial to somebody, for the audience. It should be beneficial, ultimately beneficial.
And that is actually the most defining quality of the words of a devotee, is that they're continuously speaking for the benefit of others. And we see that their words can actually uplift and can purify even people who may not ordinarily be interested in spiritual life. So, it should be truthful, it should be pleasing, and it will be beneficial if our consciousness is in the right place.
Now Krishna is going to describe the austerities of the mind. So first the body, then the speech, which is more difficult, and then the hardest is the austerity of the mind. And satisfaction, simplicity, gravity, self-control, and purification of one's existence are the austerities of the mind. And you can see that how all of them are so difficult in this Kali Yuga.
And it's very interesting because right now, we may say, well, I don't experience satisfaction, right? And this is one of the greatest challenges in today's time, that we are not satisfied. So austerity means something that we do even though we are not able to do it, or that it's difficult for us to do.
Or it's inconvenient.
Or it's inconvenient. So even though we may not experience satisfaction, but we try to the satisfaction. The mind has a nature of being dissatisfied. So,
and Prabhupada gives good tips here. To make the mind austere is to detach it from sense gratification. It should be so trained that it can always think of doing good to others. The best training for the mind is gravity in thought. One should not deviate from Krishna consciousness and must always avoid sense gratification. To purify one's nature is to become Krishna conscious. Satisfaction of the mind can be obtained only by taking the mind away from the thoughts of sense enjoyment. And like that, it goes on. This threefold austerity, performed with transcendental faith by men, not expecting material benefits, but engaged only for the sake of the Supreme, is called austerity in goodness. So this is when something is done for the pleasure of the Supreme. It's pure goodness, actually. Penance performed out of pride and for the sake of gaining respect, honor, and worship is said to be in the mode of passion. It is neither stable nor permanent. So you see, sometimes people do that. They will walk 100 miles or 500 miles or do some really difficult thing just to get the adulation of others.
Penance performed out of foolishness with self-torture or to destroy or injure others is said to be in the mode of ignorance. We already talked about that, right? That there are people who perform all kinds of austerities and penances, but the purpose is so that they can destroy others. Charity given out of duty without expectation of return at the proper time and place and to a worthy person is considered to be in the mode of goodness.
So maybe let's ask people, the charity in the mode of passion and ignorance and goodness. So what do you think is charity in these different modes? Let's see who hasn't spoken yet. Zuma, Amrita, Rajeshi, Suvarna, Eric. Charity in the mode of goodness. Can you give some example of each? Charity in the mode of passion, charity in the mode of ignorance. The charity is such an important aspect of our life, and it really we deal with it every single day. So, what do you think is an example of each, or just one?
Okay, I'll give it a try.
Okay, go ahead, Eric.
Just off the top of my head, charity in the mode of goodness would be giving money or some other support to an organization that promotes Krishna consciousness.
Thank you.
Charity in the mode of passion might be giving money to some organization so that your peers and your colleagues and your friends will see that you are making these charitable donations. So it's a donation primarily so that others can see what a good person you are. I guess it's what they call virtue signaling. And then charity in the mode of ignorance would be, I guess, giving money to organizations that engage in harmful activities. Like if I were to buy stock in a company that makes beef products, I imagine, of course, that's not really charity, but if I were to give like to a foundation belonging to a company that engages in activities like serving animals as food or serving alcoholic beverages, I don't know. I'm taking that as a guess that it might be charity in the mode of ignorance.
Very nice, Eric. Right on spot. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I can go. I would say charity. Charity in the mode of ignorance could be, doing things reluctantly, meaning not with a pure, like mind. Charity in the form of passion could be something that you do to get goodwill for yourself, like sort of from people that makes you look good. And charity in the form of goodness would be something that you do without an expectation of getting back.
Without any expectation of getting back.
Yeah.
Very nice. So let's see what Krishna says.
Prabhuji, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So what is it called then? The charity that you give, let's say you are giving some charity to some organization which is spreading Krishna consciousness, but then you want to attach your name to that. Like suppose that you are giving for a temple, or I want to put my name on this wall, or would it be in goodness or passion?
Well, because we are giving it to serve the Supreme directly, so that charity is actually transcendental. But because we have that mixed mode, right, that we want some name and fame for ourselves, so that aspect of it is in passion. But because it's given to Krishna, so Krishna will purify that aspect. Whereas if you are just in any other place, if you are just doing it just to get our name and fame, then there's no purifying, there's no redeeming factor there. And the burden of the charity that you want to enjoy the results, it will come back and hit you. So I mean, even when we do things for Krishna, we because we are not pure yet, so we'll have that goodness, passion, and ignorance that will affect all our actions. But because it is done for Krishna, anything, Krishna is going to clarify that in the last few verses. So we'll go through those. Charity given out of duty without expectation of return at the proper time and place and to a worthy person is considered to be.
You're not sharing, Prabhu.
Okay, just 1 second. And to a worthy person is considered to be in the mode of goodness. So who is a worthy person? Prabhupada describes that somebody who is engaged in the service of God, as Eric was saying. And that is the most worthy person. There are so many worthy people, but when the charity is given for that cause, and then it is used directly for enlightening people or bringing them closer to God, then that charity has the best impact in society. Charity performed with the expectation of some return or with a desire for fruitive results or in a grudging mood is said to be charity in the mode of passion. So Amrita was saying the grudging mood comes into the mode of passion. And charity performed at an impure place at an improper time to unworthy persons or without proper attention and respect is said to be in the mode of ignorance.
So like, for example, if we were walking on a pavement and there was a drunk person, right? And there's a bar and we just give him money and say, okay. Or, like somebody who's going to use that money in things that are going to harm himself. That would be just charity, right? Done, given without any knowledge and proper discrimination.
And sometimes, like, people give to a beggar or somebody and treat them very, very harshly. So that charity is also considered to be in the mode of ignorance.
From the beginning of creation, the three words Om Tat Sat were used to indicate the supreme absolute truth. These three symbolic representations were used by Brahmanas while chanting the hymns of the Vedas and during sacrifices for the satisfaction of the Supreme.
So now Krishna is taking the discussion to that, okay, we from the acting in the three modes to acting on the transcendental plane. So now he's moving us up a notch higher. So he's talking about introducing this concept of Om Tat Sat. So Om Tat Sat basically indicates the supreme absolute truth. And basically what Krishna is saying, that whatever you do with a divine consciousness and for the pleasure of the Supreme. Therefore, transcendentalists undertaking performance of sacrifice, charity, and penance in accordance with scriptural regulations begin always with Om to attain the Supreme. So Om, the syllable Om basically represents the Supreme Lord. Without desiring fruitive results, one should perform various kinds of sacrifice, penance, and charity with the word Tat. Tat is the word used for liberation or getting free from this material world. The purpose of such transcendental activities is to get free from material entanglement. And you'll see that how Prabhupada, whenever he used to sign any letters, he's always, and before his signature, he would always write Om Tat Sat. The absolute truth is the objective of devotional sacrifice and is indicated by the word Sat. Sat means the absolute eternal. The performer of such sacrifice is also called Sat, as are all works of sacrifice, penance, and charity, which, true to the absolute nature, are performed to please the Supreme Person.
And then this is the last one.
And so, after describing what is eternal and what is to be done for the pleasure of the Supreme, now Krishna is describing what is asat, which means what is not eternal. Anything done as sacrifice, charity, or penance without faith in the Supreme, O son of Pritha, is impermanent. It is called asat and it is useless both in this life and the next. So this is how he ends this chapter, chapter 17. So the bottom line, Krishna is saying that do everything for me. Even if you do it imperfectly, from that imperfection, perfection will happen. But do everything for my pleasure. That's the bottom line of this chapter, actually.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
There was that one of the verses that Krishna said, that giving to beggars and this thing. I mean, like somebody said that would be considered not charity in mode of ignorance. But suppose you distribute prasadam on the road. Suppose you're going to see a beggar, you give prasadam to that would be considered more. Sort of trying to bring him towards the transcendental this thing. So it would be considered towards goodness. So just
purified goodness. But this is like, suppose you see somebody and even there, like, charity is always encouraged, but it's like being indiscriminate, right? So you see a drunkard outside of a bar, then prasadam is different. You give him some prasadam, then that would benefit him. But if you simply just give him money so that he could go buy more drinks or whatever, then
you see people who organize
true.
part of some syndicate, and then you give to, like, especially in India, you'll see many places where there are little kids running around. They're all parts of this big money laundering scheme. And you take pity on the kid and then give them some money. It's better to give them some food or prasadam, because that cannot be misused. But if you give the money, then that can be misused for any purpose. You never know.
I have an example too. In Mexico, it's also really common for people begging to have children with them, young children, and to get like pity from people to give them money. But what that's doing when you give these kids the money is that you support them being on the street, you support them being exploited by their parents, not being in school or at home or anything else. So that's like giving charity to these kids, but supporting a negative situation.
Yeah, and then it becomes a business. There are unscrupulous people who kidnap children and get them to do all kinds of things. So yeah, one has to be very careful. I mean, charity is an extremely important component of how to purify our work. So we talked about karma yoga. So how do we, of course, we start out with our consciousness, but we also offering a part of our, the fruits of our work, for the satisfaction of Krishna. Is a very integral part of actually purifying our work and purifying our fruitive mentality. Otherwise, we naturally have an attachment for the fruits of our work. So the practical application of that is, developing this mood. But more important, along as we have that mood, it's also important to know how to give charity. And not all charities are equal, right? And for example, like in India, people give big charities and they'll make a big, they'll dig a well or maybe make some kind of a hospital or something. But like I think somebody mentioned, they'll put their name, or even like in colleges here, there's such great endowments that are given to these colleges, but making sure that their name,
building is named, the department is named after them.
Right? Our hospitals, they have their wings named after a certain person. So that kind of charity, even though it's charity, but it's in the mode of passion, right? So
I have a question, Mataji. I'm going on a flight and I get this complimentary drinks and stuff. I don't want to drink, so I pass it on to the person next to me. So that way I don't believe in drinking, but I'm giving it to that person. So would that be ignorance, right? Because I'm enabling that person. How would I?
yeah.
What would be the best recourse? What should I do in that such situation?
Don't take it, give it back to the air hostess.
Just give it back, because you don't want to have that on you, right? That you have passed it on to someone. So
Okay.
Yeah.
And what if we give charity, in a good thought, with a good thought, but the person uses it in sinful activities without us knowing that? Then
what can you do? This is the nature of this material world, right? That's why any activity that we do, keeping Krishna, because there's a story like that in Srimad Bhagavatam, and this is not related to what you're saying, it's a little bit different. But this king, he gives charity, and he has all good intentions, and he gives all these different cows to one Brahmana because he wants to get some pious credit. And then one of the cow actually wanders away from the flock and comes back to his barn. And so then he makes another, donation of the cows to another Brahmana. And so the cow that has already been donated goes to another Brahmana. So then these two Brahmanas, they get in a, he says, all right, take more cows, but what the Brahmana says, so no, we want that very cow. This first Brahmana says, I want that very cow that you've now taken back and given it to someone else. He gets into trouble. The story basically illustrates that, in mundane charity, it's like, there's no winning. You win this way, and then you make one mistake, and then again you kind of fall back. And that's why this material world is a very tricky place. Even when you, what is it? All good. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? We have all good intentions, but then it's just hard to figure out this place because there are so many slips along the way.
And I guess that's why Krishna is saying that be mindful to whom you give charity and what you give charity, and especially if you are our desire for charity, if we use that in satisfying the Supreme, and find the right recipients, who are the worthy recipients of my fruits of labor, and if you just kind of keep your charity to that, then you'll always be protected.
Even if that person misuses
it, you are free from that.
You're free from that.
I always feel like my decisions are on me and other people's decisions are on them. So if I do something well-intentioned and somebody else does it, like I already made my choice, and they made.
Yes, that is also true.
Yeah.
That our intentions will protect us. There is no doubt about that.
So in practical terms, I guess Prabhupada is explaining in this purports, as you will read, that the best recipients for charity are Krishna's devotees, or somebody who is engaged in spreading Krishna's message, and that basically then that's the best use of our charity. And that's what in the earlier olden times, the kings and everybody, they used to spend and they used to give charity to these great sadhus, whoever they would give them, so that the sadhus, their needs are taken care of, and they are going from place to place spreading message about God. So that's the best.
And also then there is the second part of it, which is the distribution of transcendental knowledge.
Yeah.
So even as spiritual people, we can be spending our money for this and for, there's so many ways, right? But out of all of that, it is described that the distribution of knowledge is actually considered to be the topmost. Transcendental knowledge. Because sometimes people say, all right, I'll distribute prasadam. It's wonderful to distribute prasadam or to do so many things. But the best is actually the distribution of knowledge, transcendental knowledge, because by that one, we are sort of, it's creating an environment of knowledge and of spiritual culture that can actually change the world.
And when people get that knowledge, then they become enabled to change themselves and also become a change for other people in the future. So it's like a chain reaction.
Dominic, do you have any thoughts?
Nothing is coming to mind right now. It's like a blank slate, but I am appreciating everything that everyone's saying. I'll try to think of something in the next few minutes.
Yeah, sure.
Question. So the modes are accompanied by certain behaviors, and I guess that as long as somebody is practicing bhakti, they will naturally tend to be more in the mode of goodness than in passion and ignorance. But if the actions associated with the mode of goodness don't occur spontaneously, but one knows that it pertains to the mode of good, like if you don't feel like doing it, but you do it because you know it's right, because you've read this chapter, then you're doing karma yoga, right?
No, it's still bhakti. It's bhakti because you're doing it once you know that this is what Krishna likes or this is what Krishna is recommending, and once you try to follow that, even though it's inconvenient or we don't really, have a taste for it, then that is an aspect of our love for Krishna. So it goes beyond karma yoga, right? So anything that we are doing, every austerity that is done for the pleasure of Krishna, even though we may not have a taste, even though we may not understand the whys of it completely, then that becomes an offering of love.
Thank you.
So, all right.
All right, Savita.
Thank you.
Yeah.